Celtics Beat is brought to you by PrizePicks and the Gametime app.
Hey everybody, welcome to a new edition of Celtics Beat. We appreciate you hanging out here with us. I always say it at the end, by then you've probably tuned out, so why not put it at the beginning? Rate, review, most importantly, subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. We greatly appreciate it. Another person who has a podcast is kind enough to join us, of course, Brian Barrett. Every once in a while, we go on the Off the Pike podcast over there with him on the ringer. He comes on with us. There's no relationship, partnership agreement there behind the scenes. He's just cordial and nice and inviting, and we are the same, and we love having you here. Barrett, how are you, bud?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. I'm a little more tired than Jayson Tatum today because I got to run on the treadmill, so I'm a little bit more fatigued than Tatum. I didn't think that we would have a situation where both Jacoby Brissett and Drake May, who only played one series in the Patriots preseason game, would play more than Jayson Tatum, but here we are.
Don't get me started on that freaking Patriots game and the utter complete waste of time of watching whatever it was, an hour and a half of Bailey Zappi, who shouldn't even be on this roster. At least they have, and sorry if anyone's late to the party on this, at least they finally rectified the Juju Smith-Schuster situation and released him earlier today. I don't even know how he broke minicamp with this team, but whatever. This is not Patriots Beat. This is Celtics Beat. And as of right now, I guess this is kind of USA Beat. This is the team that is center stage for everybody. Gold medal game, barely. It was almost the bronze medal game, gold medal game. After edging, coming back, defeating Nikola Jokic and the Serbia squad to set up a date with Victor Wembanyama, the future of the NBA, in many ways the present as well, and France on the other side. And you bring up the Jayson Tatum thing, albeit in jest. One thing that it does not seem to be in jest from a lot of people that I wouldn't really say Barrett and Evan, the people I've talked to necessarily, but definitely people that I've seen on social media actively rooting on the French in the gold medal game, out of pure allegiance, maybe to Jayson Tatum, or just being pissed off with Team USA and Steve Kerr, or whatever it is. Maybe they just want to see something different. I can't really imagine actively rooting against your country, but that is what people are doing. Some people, and I personally just don't. I can't care. I really don't care. I realize that sounds very un-American. I don't mean the Tatum thing. I mean, if the U.S. wins, great. I mean, that all they're doing at that point in time is kind of like the Celtics last year, right? Doing their job, doing what they were supposed to do. That's what Team USA is supposed to do. They are supposed to win the gold. Shouldn't have even been close against Serbia. Should have been another blowout on the way to 5-0. And now France, it's a whole, how do we pick Wemby and company to cover the spread and yada, yada, yada. But as far as Tatum goes, man, I mean, this is a weird situation. 5 games, 2 DNP-CDs, did not play coach's decision, limited minutes and some others. He did start at one point in time. We see this game against Serbia when Team USA is down by 17 points. You absolutely could have made a viable case for one of the top players in the world. And I realize that's true of all of these guys, but I mean a top 5 player in the world coming off a championship and a brand new $300+ million contract to have maybe given you a little bit of a boost, a little bit of a lift off the bench. Maybe he could have changed things up, but Steve Kerr, and we'll give you the quotes in a bit, has come out and said, it's a math problem. It's nothing against Tatum personally. Some people, conspiracy theorists like to disagree, but it's nothing about Tatum personally. It's a math problem. And with Kevin Durant being Kevin Durant, there's just no room for Jayson Tatum. What do you make of this whole thing? Because I think this is an embarrassment in terms of coaching on the part of Kerr.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. So I'm trying to figure out the reason that Kerr isn't playing him. The first thing that I've seen thrown out there, the theory is like, oh, Tatum likes to hold on to the ball. I don't think that's the case because they're playing Anthony Edwards, right? Anthony Edwards is a ball dominant guy too. So I don't think that's it. I think it's that Tatum has struggled to sort of find his shot, right? Going back to the playoffs. And I do think it's interesting. My boss, Bill Simmons, had the theory that he's not like jumping forward on his jump shot. And I'm thinking about it. I'm like, well, what about when he turned his ankle against Bam in the playoffs, right? And he shot the 3 poorly in the playoffs. That's 4 games into the postseason, because if you look at the last 48 regular season games, Tatum hit the 14th most threes in the NBA, and he shot 39.4%. So he was actually shooting at a high level for the majority of last season. He had the poor start to the season shooting the 3, and then he got on fire. I think it's more about shooting than anything else, because we know how the Warriors dynasty was sort of created. But the thing that I just can't get over here is I felt like the whole idea of having Team USA compared to these other teams is the depth of the team, right? So, and I'm not defending Steve Kerr's decision here not to play Jayson Tatum. But for example, let's say in the game on, what was it now? Thursday, Anthony Edwards isn't playing well. Anthony Edwards is actually playing poorly. He had one foul that was awful. He had a really bad turnover in that game. I believe he finished with 2 points, 2 fouls, and 2 turnovers. Like, he was legitimately bad in the game. Well, then why in the second half can't you go to Jayson Tatum, especially considering the fact that how was Serbia killing you? They were hitting a million threes, right? So what's the way to sort of take the 3-ball away? Oh, a switching defense, which the Celtics are one of the switchiest teams in the NBA. Jayson Tatum, him and Bam Adebayo are the most versatile defenders on the team. I would put Tatum and Bam ahead of Anthony Davis when it comes to that perspective. I think Bam can hold up a little better against guards. So why wouldn't you turn to Tatum then? So that would be the first point, is it just doesn't make sense. Like, oh, there's not room for Tatum. He is arguably the most versatile player on the entire team. And secondarily, and maybe this is going to sound a little homerish, but they came into the tournament. Steve Kerr came into training camp, I should say. And remember, Tatum was late getting there because Tatum was, celebrating his championship and signing, the richest contract in the history of the NBA. If you look at the stars of the team, right? LeBron, Curry, and Durant, and I would say they have, I know Embiid sat one game. But they plan to start Embiid all the time because they recruited him, right? Like, there was a possibility that he went to the French team. Okay. So Steve Kerr's plan, and they said it. Grant Hill said, hey, if LeBron and Curry was awesome, obviously he saved them. If those guys want to be on the team, they're on the team. And he said, Embiid, LeBron, and Curry are starting every game. Steve Kerr said that at the beginning of this whole thing. Now, one game he, of course, didn't play Embiid. Okay. So if you look at that, and we know Durant, who broke the record, he's going to get his playing time. So if that's the case, if those are going to be the featured players, because that had been determined by the head coach of the team, he determined that before the tournament, before training camp started. Jayson Tatum is the next guy up in terms of his stature on the team. He's the only guy on the team right now that has made 3 consecutive first-team All-NBAs. He's the only guy on the team that is coming off a championship. He's the only guy on the team that just led the NBA Finals in points, rebounds, and assists. I think, and maybe this conversation was had, he should have been told, hey, these are going to be the featured players, because the reality is Tatum is an on-the-ball player. And I'm not saying he can't play off the ball. He can. But we just saw him play point guard throughout the NBA playoffs, and in particular in the NBA Finals. He was the point guard for the Celtics on offense, and he was the center on defense. All these other guys, like Booker, can find a role because he's a shooter, right? He's an outstanding shooter. Drew and Derek White are basically playing the same roles they have. Bam is not going to be a featured offensive player. Anthony Davis is not going to be a featured offensive player. I think there should have been a conversation with Jayson Tatum, because if I was Tatum, I'd be thinking, wait, hold on. I averaged the second most points on the team that just won the gold medal, not even 4 years ago, 3 years ago because of COVID. I had, 19 points coming off the bench in the gold medal game. I scored the second most points. I think there should have been more of a conversation with Tatum before he went there, because from a Celtics perspective, the guy just played 97 games. It was pointless for him to go to this thing and for this to be the storyline.
Mm-hmm. And before you go, I'll just give you the Steve Kerr quote, and this is courtesy of Tim Reynolds.
Sorry for being so long there, but I had to get a lot off my chest.
All good information, all good, thoughts, obviously. Kerr said, it's not what I'm seeing from Jayson. It's what I'm seeing from the other guys. Like I've said so many times during this tournament, the last 6 weeks, it's just hard to play 11 people, even in an NBA game. It's not about anything Jayson is doing or not doing. It's just about combinations and the way the group has played together, the way Kevin has filled in since he came back from his injury. It's just a math problem more than anything else, as I alluded to before, obviously. So that is where it is. Ev, where I think we should go with this, really, because this is the biggest thing. It's not the, is Tatum butthurt about this, and does he have a right to be? And he does, obviously. He should have some sort of role. I mean, throw him out there for 5-8 minutes, whatever it is. Like within a 40-minute game in the 200 minutes or whatever it is, that you've got, whatever the math, I don't know. You've got time to play Jayson Tatum in each of these games. All of these guys. This isn't about Tatum. All the Halliburton, Embiid, anyone else who's been a DNP-CD. You've got room for all of these guys, especially during these blowouts. You want to tighten your rotation during a close game against Serbia, so be it. But every other step along the way, you have had the room, obviously, to make, an opportunity for Tatum or whoever else. But the last thing that Barrett said of is I think the biggest, which is the Celtics. Everyone, White, Holiday, everyone on that roster already has a shortened off season because of playing upwards of 100 games and the run to the championship. They start early because they go to Dubai for this game and, games, and then, come back around, obviously, and the lead into the regular season. Then it all starts again. You have a very abbreviated time to sort of sit back and catch your breath. And if you are Holiday and you are White and you have a real opportunity there and you're playing considerable minutes, fine, you're not part of this conversation. But if you're Tatum, really just kind of getting your work in during practices and, hanging out with these guys, and yeah, it's an opportunity and I'm sure it's an unbelievable one, and you got your family there and Deuce and everything, but you think that a part of him at least wouldn't rather just be kicking it at home and taking a break after the grueling year that he had and what he still has in front of him versus this?
Yeah, I think there's maybe some pressure of trying to be because we're looking for the new face of the NBA, and people are gravitating towards certain people. Anthony Edwards is everybody's flavor of the week at this particular point. But I think Tatum maybe carries that a little bit with him. Hey, I have the signature shoe, I have the championship, I'm the cover of Sports Illustrated. It's everything. I need to do this to keep my stature as the next guy in this league, and to be not played at all in 2 games is crazy. And Barrett brought up they were getting absolutely trounced in the first half. At what point do you say, hey, we need to try something different here and maybe put some different people out there? The thing that bothers me is yes, the reason why Tatum isn't playing is because he's not shooting the ball very well. Well, it's really hard to shoot the ball very well when you have no rhythm at all. You know what I mean? He's not out there playing to get into rhythm. I know the ball sometimes can be tough to get used to and depth perception, all that stuff. But after a while, he's one of the best players in the league. He's going to figure it out, and to not have the opportunity to, I think, is frustrating. And it's frustrating a lot of people. You saw Tatum's mom going nuts, quote tweeting Dick Vitale trying to figure this out. You know what I mean?
She was quoting Greeny even.
It's frustrating because, I think Brian's point of there should have been a discussion of what everybody's role is. And I feel like a lot of times there's no discussion at all about what everybody's supposed to be doing here. I mean, there are definitely enough pieces on this team to make this work a little bit better. I mean, I know you probably want the ball in Durant's hands, but Durant's also a pretty awesome just standalone shooter if you want to. Derek White's an excellent shooter. Halliburton, I know, is not a great defensive player, but he can shoot. Holiday. I mean, you can go on the line here. I can go on and on. What's really frustrating to me, and somebody pointed this out yesterday, and I still can't quite wrap my head around this, boys. Maybe either of you can help me. I haven't watched every game, so just flat out, I have not watched every second of every game of the USA. I apologize. Have we seen, and this is off of what do all these teams have in common? They play a lot more together than Team USA does. They have more time, et cetera, et cetera. They build chemistry. That's why it seems to be easier for these guys. If you're Steve Kerr, why wouldn't you play the 3 guys, Derek White, Drew Holiday, and Jayson Tatum together, to have played more basketball together than anybody of these teams, any of these guys combined? They had just won the most games in the regular season together. They won the NBA championship. They've played over, as you said, Kaufman, over 100 games together, right? And yet these 3 guys haven't shared the court at the same time together in a single game. How is that a plan? How does you guys watch? I was watching yesterday. Drew Holiday did his thing where he leaves his assignment to go double someone. I believe it was Jokic on the baseline on the left side. He comes down, right, to double Jokic. Jokic is crazy because he can see over everything, and he just throws the ball to the top of the key where Drew's guy was. But nobody went to go recover where Drew left a vacant spot. And everybody's just standing around watching. I think it was Bogdanovich hit another open 3-point shot. It was one of these things where the chemistry sometimes would help. And Steve Kerr is just throwing that out the window. We don't need chemistry. They're so lucky. Steve Kerr is lucky that Steph went off. LeBron dialed it back and to really carry the team on his back for a while. And Embiid finally had a moment throughout this entire summer. Finally had a second. If those three things don't happen, this is a ginormous collapse, and Kerr has to eat a ton of crow, right? Instead, everything works out. We're on to the French team and then the gold medal game. I can't fathom for the life of me, boys, how they haven't clicked to that at all whatsoever. I'm sitting here looking at Steve Kerr saying, like, dude, the answer is sitting like right in the face. You could get all these guys exposure if you want to, but to not play Barrett, to not play the three Celtics who just won the NBA title any minutes together, to me, is mind-blowing.
Yeah, and whenever Tatum's played with Derek White, those minutes have gone well, which shouldn't shock anybody because they're always up in the top tier in terms of plus minus those two guys. So it would have been interesting to play those guys, but I really do think it's the shooting, and maybe Kerr looks back at the playoff sort of performance from Tatum not shooting the three well, even though the Celtics won a championship. I think that really is the reason. But the reason I just bring up the fact that if you look at sort of like Tatum's stature compared to everybody else and what he did on the last Olympic team, and also his standing in the NBA right now, right? So if you're going into the 2024-2025 season, Tatum is the best player on that team. He's the best player on that team, right? LeBron and Curry are older at this particular point in time. We saw last year, Curry faded down the second half of the season. The only possible, and Embiid, until we see him actually prove it in the postseason, you're not taking Embiid over Jayson Tatum, right? Maybe you say, hey, Embiid could be a better regular season player and win the MVP, fine. But we've seen some of Embiid's issues when we get to the postseason. Like, I don't know, game 7 against the Celtics, when he gave up more points as the primary defender than points he actually scored because they just exposed him in terms of the drop coverage. That wasn't it. By the way, like Embiid had his moment, the 7 straight points. He was also part of the reason, a big part of the reason they fell behind because of the drop coverage, that they were just hitting all those shots. So the fact that they didn't use the 6'10" most versatile defender on the team, that's irritating to me in that game because Serbia scored 91. Everyone points to the shooting. They still scored 91 points, and they were generating a lot of good shots, and Tatum could have helped when it came to that. I would imagine he'd be motivated because he's had really, outside of the 10-10 performance, he hasn't done much. And the other thing that I would say as it pertains to Tatum is if he knew all this, maybe he says, hey, I take this summer off. I'll come back and be the face of the team in 2028. Now I wonder, like, whoa, 2028 rolls around. Does Jayson, like Anthony Edwards is probably going to be given the team, like he's going to be the face of the team. But you start to think about it, Team USA, they kind of like, we'll see some of these young guys coming up, the Cooper Flags of the world, et cetera. But Tatum sort of needs to be like on that team for Team USA. You look at Canada, right? And I know Jamal Murray, that's a whole different story, how bad he was. But Shea is going to be back. And Shea just finished runner up to the MVP. Nembhard was awesome for that team outside of the elimination game. Like, that's a team with a lot of talent. They just have to find some big guys. Now, Wemby at that point is probably going to be the MVP of the NBA, you would think, even though he's not really scoring. And they don't really have a ton of, although the dancing bear has been going off for them, they don't really have a lot of depth on that team. They don't really have a lot of guards. And we'll see where Germany's at that point in time. But if I'm Jayson Tatum, if Kerr's the coach, I'm fucking done. Oh, I don't know. Can you swear on this pod? Sorry. Maybe you can.
When we're talking about this, Barrett.
Yeah, you're
okay. Good. All right, I forgot if we swore on this pod or not. But if I'm Tatum, I wouldn't play. On your pod?
You should.
Yeah, I swear on my pod. I tried at the beginning when I first did it. My mom's like, "You're swearing too much." I'm like, "All right, I got to cut it back a little bit." I think it's from
when it feels necessary, and you know what? Right there, it did.
That just slipped. But so my point being, like, if you guys were Tatum and Kerr's the coach in 2028, would you play for him? I certainly wouldn't. If they give it to Spoelstra or Lute takes over, maybe I would. Maybe it's not their decision, but like I would not be playing for Kerr.
Mazzulla takes over.
PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports as well. Unlike other apps, I don't know if you're aware of this, but on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers, okay? So all you do, you pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll in. It's truly that simple. You get in on the daily fantasy action with your friends. You can become part of the PrizePicks community today and win now more than up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks. As little as 4 correct picks is all it takes. You can turn $10 into $1,000. And if you're looking for promotions, PrizePicks has you covered each and every week, from lowering select players' stat projections on Tuesdays to help your lineups hit, or even Ev getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays.
Who's doing that? Who's giving you money back even if you lose? That's not usually how it goes. That's why PrizePicks is the best, and there is still time to take advantage of USA taking home some gold medals from Paris, men's basketball, water polo, weightlifting, cycling, all still on the docket in Paris. The women's basketball team wraps things up late on Sunday to give you one last chance. Look, I made my first $10 deposit, received an instant $10 bonus. You have the skills, as Kaufman said before. You can play for a shot at turning your $10 into $1,000. Kaufman, does that seem appealing to you?
I like money. Yeah, I'd like $1,000.
Same. I think it's a winning proposition. So download the PrizePicks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It is that easy. PrizePicks today.
Let me tie these two things together. Kind of what you're talking about with is Kerr going to be the coach, and what you were talking about, Ev, in terms of why aren't White, Tatum, Holiday as a trio seeing the floor together. So I don't know if you guys saw this. We certainly haven't mentioned it, although Ev did bring up the Sports Illustrated issue and cover and all of that earlier. There were two guys. We had Chris Mannix on with us recently. There were two guys that were featured in that article. Tatum was one, the other, Bob Cousy. Well, Cousy has talked about this with Dan Shaughnessy in the Boston Globe, and here's what Coos had to say. Tatum's on the cover of Sports Illustrated this month. Any experts that I have read lately have chosen him in the top 5, sometimes number 1 in the bleeping world. Now, Kerr is telling the world he doesn't agree. In a 40-minute game, if you can't find 5 minutes to play somebody on the team without hurting yourself, when Kerr did it last week, he was in no danger of losing the game. But in this case, they got down by 17 points, and he's got to worry about losing the game. And then to not let Tatum get off the bench, to me, there's got to be some kind of bias he has got against the Celtics. Let me ask you guys this. Is what we've seen so far, and I personally would lean more in this direction than the other, is it more coaching malpractice on the part of Steve Kerr and company, but he's the head coach, he's the face of this thing, he's got to own it? Or is there bias against the Celtics? I hesitate to see that given the run that we see from Holiday and White, but you guys tell me, does he want his guys being, Curry, formerly Durant, to be more at the center stage of this thing?
You can make the argument that they're just trying to let Curry and LeBron and Durant get one more and have them be a part of this thing.
Yeah, because they're going to age out, obviously.
Because this is it. I mean, this is Curry's only Olympic appearance. LeBron, he's been the guy forever, and Durant's the all-time leading scorer in Olympic basketball history for Team USA. So, obviously, you have some legends on this team, and clearly And I'm not trying to say those guys shouldn't be playing because they legitimately won the game for Team USA yesterday or on Thursday. Right. So, that's. You can't really argue with it, but the reliance on those guys, I think, is an interesting question. Why is Kerr sticking? And the Embiid point is a fantastic one. Sticking with Embiid, if that guy gets double teamed, he has no clue what to do, and it's growing increasingly frustrating. I watched that game, and I can't believe Anthony Davis doesn't play more because whenever the ball goes up, Embiid, if the ball's not coming to him off the rebound, he doesn't move. He has cement feet. Meanwhile, at least Anthony Davis is trying to get a rebound and tip it out to somewhere. At least Bam Adebayo is trying to tip it out to some other guy. Embiid just stands there, and it drives me crazy. Look, I don't think it's a Celtics an anti-Celtics thing. I don't think it's that. I will say this. Thank you to Team USA for providing some motivation for Jaylen and Jayson as they come back to try and defend a title here. Jaylen obviously has got some issues with Team USA, and now Tatum does. So thank you very much, guys. But I think it's more of a Kerr thing, and I think what's interesting is to read the Golden State fan perspective of this whole thing, because they've been dealing with this for a long time. I'm not in that universe. I'm not reading the discourse of after every single game that Golden State has. But Kerr's rotations apparently have been a problem for a long time in Golden State, and this is just more illuminating of the fact that his rotations are a little off. And like I said, I think Curry and LeBron specifically really bailed Kerr out yesterday, because if it doesn't go well and they lose, Kerr's got to answer way more questions about what he does and doesn't do as the coach of this team.
Yeah, well, I think it's with Kerr. I don't think it's a specific bias against the Celtics, but I do think there's sort of some, whether it's like unconscious or not, it's like a previous belief he had about Tatum, right? So if you go back to the 2022 finals, they had both Jaylen and Tatum's number, right? Where with Jaylen, it was force him to his left hand, and it was Tatum after this amount of dribbles. We want to force him off the 3-point line. We don't want him to get to the basket. So it's like he figured out a game plan how to stop Tatum. Although that was 2 years ago, he was a much better player. And I think he sees Tatum, going back to this whole ball stopper thing, as like not his typical type of player. Like if you look at sort of, although he did trade for Shaq, but you look at the Steve Nash era where the ball is flying around. And if you look at some of those like role players, because he's looking for Tatum to be a role player on this team if he is going to play, right? You think about the Andre Iguodala's, the Sean Livingston. Remember when he was there? Like those guys are just like really quick decision makers, right? So I think that's part of it with Kerr is he just doesn't see Tatum fitting into the way that he wants basketball to be played. Even if it's wrong, I think that's what it is. I think it's a bias on sort of Tatum's game. But the one thing I'll say about Kerr is ever since that finals that he beat the Celtics in, let's acknowledge like this dude has lost his fastball. I mean, he had, and I'm not blaming him for this happening, but he lost his team 2 years ago. They couldn't win like on the road. It was a complete debacle. They had the Jordan Poole Draymond situation. They couldn't win any games on the road. That team completely fell apart. And then you go to this past season, to Valenti's point about his rotations, he wouldn't play Kuminga until Kuminga called out the coaching staff. Kuminga turned out to be the second best player on the team. And look, I'm not blaming him for the Draymond issues. We know Draymond missed a bunch of time as well, but it also took him a while to get to Trace Jackson Davis when anybody watching Kevon Looney this year knew that Kevon Looney like couldn't move anymore. Okay. And we know how important he was to the dynasty they built. He was awesome in the series against the Celtics. I still think the guy's getting offensive rebounds against the Celtics. And the other thing that Kerr did specifically this year, and this kind of goes full circle back to the whole Celtics point, he actually thought Draymond Green's strategy against the Celtics was a good strategy to just leave Jaylen Brown open because of his 3-point percentage. Those weren't, his 3-point percentage isn't just on wide open threes. This is an NBA player. If you leave him open, he's going to hit basically walk through jump shots or shoot around jump shots. Steve Kerr actually went with that plan. Like he was presented this plan. Hey guys, let's just leave Jaylen Brown open. He thought it was a good idea. Okay. So Steve Kerr, from my perspective, has lost his fastball for the past 2 years, ever since they won that championship. And remember, I'm not saying he made the pick, but he's there with Bob Myers when they decided to draft James Wiseman. I know it's weird in terms of the whole COVID situation, but there's a million guys that went after him that could have fit on that team, that could have helped that propel that dynasty going forward. I know they got 22 and they're always going to have 2022. And as I mentioned earlier, he traded for Shaq on his team and made absolutely no sense to trade for Shaq because it took away what they did well, which was playing fast and getting shots up and all that. But I feel like Steve Kerr, to Valenti's point, was really close, because if they lose that game and Tatum doesn't play, it's like, hold on, Serbia just put up 91 points on you, and you have this guy that was just on the best defense in the playoffs and you didn't use him. Like, didn't he cover centers in the playoffs? Like you didn't want to use him at all. So I think Kerr's been absolutely atrocious throughout this run. People are giving him credit for his lineups. I'm like, look at who's on the team. Like, how difficult is it to, and when have the lineups been like great? Like, I would argue the starting lineup, and you mentioned LeBron was awesome. Curry was awesome in that game. The starting lineup, the reason they got into that hole, the starting lineup, amazingly, with Drew Holiday out there, right? The starting lineup is not good on defense. How many plus, and look, LeBron stepped up his defense. Part of the reason they won is because LeBron took on the Jokic matchup late, so Embiid could kind of like zone up behind him and help out at the basket. Who's a plus defender right now in the starting lineup? Drew Holiday. That's it. Booker's not a plus defender. Curry is at this point in his career well below average. Remember, Carlick Jones earlier in the tournament just absolutely cooked the guy in pool play. Like they don't have Embiid can be sort of, you can take advantage of Embiid in this with the drop coverage with all the shooting from some of these other teams. So part of the reason they're in that hole is because the combination was not a good combination defensively, even if that combination with Durant at the end of the game coming in for Drew, that group won you the game. Part of the reason you're in that hole is because the defense is so bad.
Quick break from today's show to tell you today's show is brought to you by Gametime. I remember first time I went to a game, a Sox game when I was a kid, the Milwaukee Brewers were in town, and literally my only memory of that is Mo Vaughn, my favorite player at the time, hit a home run. It was with my grandparents. It was like the only time he went to Fenway Park. It was a really special memory for me. Great memories of your own today with the help of Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. And the prices on Gametime, the app, that go down and the closer it gets to first pitch. And like my parents do this all the time. They like to go wait till first pitch is gone and then go to like whatever ticket box office and just see what they have left and just snack up great deals. Do that with Gametime with last minute deals, all in prices and views from your seat, lowest price guaranteed. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. And literally, folks, Sox, red hot. They have had a fun season so far. They're in this great ride of a 2024 with no expectations, kind of hanging on the wild card. We love that. Use Gametime to get to Fenway or whatever stadium you want to go to throughout the rest of the summer. Again, you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, you name it, they got it. And you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. So make sure you take the time and take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed.
Let's go back to the motivation thing too that Ev had brought up before, because we talked about this a couple weeks back whenever we had Adam Himmelsbach on right before he left for Paris, and we were talking about the Jaylen situation and being pissed about not making it and holding it against Nike and what's the relationship with Derek White going to be, all of these different things that have obviously been talking points as it relates to the Celtics. But Ev, you mentioned before, this is just another thing to fire up Tatum. And, Himmelsbach, I guess for both of these guys, right? Like with Brown, it's, he wasn't all NBA. He, wasn't named to Team USA and has had all of this sort of drama and people questioning his, what kind of guy he is, all the Stephen A. Smith stuff. And he's not marketable and guys don't necessarily like him and on and on. And then with Tatum, obviously, he doesn't win MVP, and I don't mean of the league. I mean conference finals or NBA finals. He is, of course, first team All-NBA, and he is on Team USA, but now he's not playing all that much, and he gets benched in 2 games and limited minutes elsewhere, and who knows if he's going to play or however much in the gold medal game against France. And, basically does the concept of extra motivation exist? And Himmelsbach is of the mind that, no, it doesn't. You're given 100%, you're given 100%. You can't go to 110. Like it doesn't exist. People like to say, I'm giving 110%. That's not a thing. You're either given 100% or you're not. But I don't know. To me, Ev, Barrett, whoever, like there's a middle ground there that does exist to where, you can certainly Tom Brady talked about it all the time throughout his 20 plus years in the league of their, always being motivated by being number 199. And there were, even if he had to invent something to get pissed about, there was a chip on his shoulder for some reason. I think that is very true of a lot of professional athletes, not just the great ones, but even, Michael Jordan would always see, there was in the Last Dance, the Bulls thing, people talking about, how Jordan, even if there wasn't a critic, there wasn't a naysayer, he would make one up in his own mind just to find that extra gear. I mean, is Celtics fans want to believe that Tatum and Brown are going to be on a warpath this coming season, that all of this crap has only further fueled Boston to banner 19. Do you guys agree with that concept, or do you think that's just something that we say to make ourselves feel good?
No, I agree with this 100%. Again, watching Tom Brady do it for 20 years, you have a front row seat for it. It's not easy to win championships in any league that you participate in. And it's really hard to go back to back. It's really hard to have a dynasty and all that stuff. You sometimes need a little extra motivation, a little extra push to do something you normally wouldn't do, something out of your comfort zone, right? You need someone telling you that, you can't do this again, or like what's been the biggest topic, right? Like, or one of the biggest topics is there hasn't been a repeat champion since Golden State. Like nobody can really do this anymore with the current NBA rules, et cetera, et cetera. Like all those things you can take and file away and be like, yeah, well, you think that? Well, watch this. And this is just a little bit more of it. These two guys, I'll say with Tatum and Brown, like they haven't needed, maybe that's the wrong way to put it. Obviously, a lot of things came out after they lost to Golden State in the finals on their home floor and how much that motivated them for the next season, right? Because they're like, we hated hearing the Warriors celebrate in our locker rooms, like in Boston. It drove us nuts. And obviously, they got to the Eastern Conference Finals and Tatum rolled his ankle, so that whole thing was shot. These two guys, like independent of all that stuff, Tatum and Brown have always come back the next season like a little bit better, or in certain cases, a lot better than they were the year prior. So I don't know if they need the extra motivation to come back and be stronger, but this certainly doesn't it's not a hindrance to them maybe getting because like Jaylen used to put out videos of him being in the lab, working on stuff, working with T-Mac, his training facility down in Atlanta. He would always post videos from that kind of stuff. With Tatum, you always know he's working out with Hamlin because Hamlin's always posting things, right? So these guys obviously put in the work in the offseason. But, if you need a little extra motivation to carry you to that next level, I mean, Kobe, he's celebrated as an absolute maniac because he was always looking for some edge to become better. He's waking up there's that classic, and I was listening to Bill literally this morning, Barrett, talk about how like the guys, I think on the 08 team were coming back from the club at like 4:00 in the morning or whatever. And Kobe was getting up to go to the gym. And it's like, oh, that's the kind of work ethic we need to like become that next level guy. It all comes in different shapes and sizes and flavors, but I certainly don't think this is a hindrance to those two guys specifically coming back and saying, screw all this stuff. Like we're going to prove to everybody that we're the two best players in the world. And we're going to do this again, despite nobody thinking that we're good enough for anything. I don't think it's a bad thing, Barrett, do you?
No, I think if it's a good thing. I thought the Jaylen situation I thought was a little bit odd just because we didn't hear anything about this. Like when the original team was they chose the original team. He wasn't mad about not being on the team. And then it wasn't until Derek White was the replacement. And I know like Derek White and him are good and all that, but it's just weird to me that he was so mad after the fact. I think part of it is like, look, man, he just won the Finals MVP and the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. Maybe he's feeling really good. So he wanted to say that and based on the way that they've sort of handled Tatum, I don't know what type of role Jaylen would have had on this team, right? Because he's a guy that had the ball in his hands a lot. And he's really a guy that's accustomed to having the ball too. So I don't know what his role would have been on the team, but he obviously, if he's going to use this as motivation, I'm fine with it. I think the bigger motivation for him is just like, how was I not on an all NBA team? To me, like that was kind of a joke. So I think he was already mad about that. And then this Team USA thing comes. Remember, he said like, I don't win anything or I don't win shit or whatever it was when he won Eastern Conference Finals MVP. And I don't know if I mentioned this here before, but they're the only team that in NBA history that has won 64 games and didn't have either two all NBA guys or have the MVP. So it was one or the other. It's like Dirk in 07, right? LeBron in one of his years with the Cavs. Like it's very rare that you have a team win 64 games and only have one all NBA guy. As it pertains to Tatum, I do worry about the shot, like with the whole Drew Hanlen thing. Like, I wonder if they like mess around with that thing too much. It seems like it's in his head. What's ever going on with it? Because he's too good of a shooter to be shooting this poorly in the postseason. And obviously, the one that he shot off the backboard in this tournament is weird. But I do think there will be a motivational factor. And the other element to that is you're not going to have Porzingis in all likelihood until January. So Tatum and Jaylen are going to be back to taking pretty close to the amount of shots they were taking 2 years ago, where they sacrificed a couple of shots per game. So I think those guys, their numbers could actually go up. And of course, I think Derek White's numbers will go up. I think Drew will have more of an offensive role during the regular season. Although Drew's the one guy where I'm like, let's be careful with the minutes here. Let's be careful with the games, just because he's a guy outside of Al, obviously, that's in the mid-30s. But I do think this will be, there's the element of the Team USA stuff, Kaufman, that you point out with Jaylen and Tatum. There's the All-NBA stuff with Jaylen. And then the last sort of part of this is, let's not forget what everybody was saying, like during the playoffs. Remember, everybody's picking Dallas. More ESPN experts pick Dallas than the Celtics. And everybody's sort of idea with this is, oh, they didn't play anybody. All these teams had injuries. And everybody dismissed the fact that a guy that averaged 20 points per game for the Celtics wasn't playing at all. And I'm not saying that's as big as Donovan Mitchell going down for Cleveland, right? Or Jimmy Butler, although the Heat were never going to beat the Celtics. The Mavericks were healthy. They had their guys when they were in the NBA Finals, and they just beat Minnesota, who beat the defending champs, if you want to go like down that whole road. But the other thing is, and I hate to bring up a Warriors comparison because I was just bashing Steve Kerr. Remember, this same conversation happened with the Warriors after they won. It was, hey, Kyrie didn't play. Remember, Kyrie got hurt in game one that went to overtime. Kevin Love got hurt, and the Cavs actually had a lead. They were up 2-1 in that series. And then the next year, now, ultimately, the Warriors didn't win the NBA championship, but they broke the record for the most wins in NBA history. It was almost like scorched earth. I think that the Celtics will come out sort of in that fashion. Now, I hope they're careful, and I think Mazzulla is really good about the minutes stuff outside of Tatum and Brown. Like sometimes, like, why is Tatum in the game when they're up 20? But he's really good with Al. And that's a scary thing about Porzingis, because they were really careful with Porzingis, and he still ended up getting injured. But my point with all this is, I think, like, for a team that won a championship, it's usually like this coronation, right? Like, oh, Giannis had the 50-point game. He finally won a championship. Look what Kawhi did with the Raptors, right? LeBron, look at what he did in Cleveland, like beating that team, coming back from the crate. Even the Lakers, where they won the Peach Jam, that AAU tournament they had in the Orlando bubble, they won that. Like, he gets all this credit and says it's the best championship that he ever won, even though nobody had to travel. But anyway, my point with this is, the Celtics, it sort of felt like the opposite, right? Like they haven't really, like, I think the players feel that way, but there's almost been like, Tatum gets criticism for not winning the NBA Finals MVP. It's kind of like similar to what happened with Curry back at the beginning of his career. So I do think there's going to be sort of like this FU attitude that this team has.
Yeah, I want to hop on that for a second, because I was thinking about this morning about, it just seems like everything that has to surround the Celtics this whole year has just been an absolute nightmare from like just a discourse standpoint. Like all season, I mean, you guys saw it. It was like, oh, it won't mean anything unless they win the finals. Like nothing mattered, right? Then they go to the playoffs. It's like, oh, everybody's hurt. This doesn't matter. Like, it just feels like there's like a toxic discussion around this team, and like even on Team USA, right? Like, if Tatum doesn't play, and that's the biggest storyline, dude. And I know we're in the dead time of content, right? Thank God football's back, so we don't have to deal with this all the time. But that story was like the A block of like First Things First and First Take, and like everybody had a comment on it, and like to me, it just seems like there's a lot of negativity surrounding this team, right? No matter what it is, like it's not like Jayson's like a hard guy to root for. You know what I mean? He's a great dad. He's never like involved in anything off the court that has to do like poorly with. It's not like he's John. And I'm not trying to kill John Morant here. He's just made bad decisions. But like, he's not like John Morant out there like flashing guns at nightclubs and things. He's like pretty like laid back, just plays basketball, and is a great dad. Like I compared him to Tim Duncan years ago, because it just seems like he's the easiest guy to root for in the league, because he doesn't do anything bad. He just shows up, plays basketball, and leaves. Like that's kind of what you want. And yet, like, there's just toxicity that follows him everywhere, and it's driving me crazy. And now here we have this thing. We've talked about it for an hour, basically, right? We haven't even talked about anything else. We haven't talked about Yabusele like finding a role with Team France. Like, was Danny right about that the whole time? We haven't talked about the possible FSG stuff. We've talked only about Jayson Tatum in this one game for an hour. Why is it like this, boys? Like, why is it? Help me out.
We're gluttons for, storylines for the us weekly kind of crap or tabloid crap, and this falls into the category. I mean, this is the discourse of being a sports fan in general. It feels like a lot of this stuff does get amplified in the NBA versus the other sports, and like the petty season people used to say. And we've been saying for years, Ev, NBA offseason is way more interesting than the season itself. And that was before the Celtics were even good, let alone great and champions and all of that and what they've grown into. This is the way of the world, man. This is why sports talk radio, this isn't a show that takes callers, obviously, but it's why sports talk radio is it feeds into the negativity. It breeds the negativity in many ways. It has for a long time, for decades, quite frankly. It's just people love to lean into that stuff. They love the drama. And so that's why this is, Barrett. I mean, that's what people want to grapple onto, and it's the water cooler stuff they want to talk about. Nobody, outside of your true diehard Celtics fan, nobody wants to have a conversation about Yabusele. I mean, hell, we haven't in FSG, like that's not going to happen. John Henry's not going to buy the Celtics, and we haven't even acknowledged really the gold medal game and attempting to preview USA against France in any way. I guess in part because by the time some people listen to the show, the Olympics are going to be over, but it's just it's unfortunate, but it's kind of the way of the world, Ev. That's where we're at. And any like Joe Schmo or whoever, like anybody can have the Tatum conversation, not intelligently necessarily. I like to think we've done a pretty good job with it, but anybody can just in a very casual way have it. Oh, did you hear what's going on? Why aren't they? I mean, my wife could probably say to you, and who is not a sports fan, not a Celtics fan, why aren't they, playing Jayson Tatum at the Olympics? Why am I seeing this on my phone? Why am I getting these alerts about this? That's what this is.
Well, and I think too, like with the Tatum portion of this is, I feel like the players have defended him, right? Not the players on the team. I'm talking about like Jordan Clarkson is tweeting about why isn't Tatum playing. Draymond Green is calling out his own coach for the rotations. Draymond Green is doing rants on his podcast about his own coach not playing Jayson Tatum. Heck, Perk, who said some of the craziest things we've heard about the Celtics, going back to when he said, if you put Joe Mazzulla's brain in a bird, the bird would fly backwards. Even Perk said, like, this is disrespectful. Stephen A. Smith came out and said this is
trying to get back on the duck boats.
Maybe he is, but yeah. So even Stephen A. Smith, he came out and Stephen A. Smith ranted about this, that Jayson Tatum should be playing. So I do feel like the players around the league and some of the people in the media around the league have defended Tatum for that, like have defended Tatum and like stuck up for him, because I got to say this just on like a human level, and I don't have a relationship with Jayson Tatum. I feel like watching that game was like kind of painful, just like seeing him in the warm-up suit on the bench. And then when the next five comes in that he doesn't come in, I'm like, oh shoot, he's out of the rotation again. And this is going to be a story. Like, I legitimately feel bad for the guy. I mean, and this is a guy that just signed a contract for $300 million. He's showing off his new sneakers that he has with Jordan Brand, right? And he just won an NBA championship. And I'm saying, like, I feel bad for it. It's just weird. It's a really weird story.
And like to back to the point of like roles, right? If you wanted more guys to shoot the ball, like if you wanted more 3-point shooters, like get Luke Kennard on this team. Right? One of the best 3-point shooters in the history of the game. Get him out there. Like, don't let Jayson Tatum just rot in the bench because you can't find a role for this guy. Like, what are we doing here? Like, Derek White and Drew Holiday are like perfect guys to be on this team because they don't need the ball. They space the floor. They cut off they cut off ball. They're always moving. They're great defensively, et cetera, et cetera. Like, there's no role for Jayson Tatum on this team. I just have a hard time believing that. It's mind-blowing to me. And again, like, yeah, you're right. Like, Draymond's calling out his own coach on his body. Like, that's not going to be awkward next year when they see each other. Like, what? Like, what is that?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I get a question. I get a question for you guys.
Sure.
So this is a total hypothetical, because at the end of the game on Thursday, Serbia took forever to foul, right? Like, I'm just like, what are they doing? Like, it's at that point, it's a 4-point game. They had just scored. I don't know why they weren't fouling. It's like, dude, you waited until the very end of the shot clock, and then you fouled one of the greatest foul shooters of all time in Steph Curry. There's a lot of things that they didn't handle well at the end of the game. And I would even say in the first half of the game, Bogdanović sat too much. There was one point during the third quarter where Bogdanović and Jokic were sitting at the same time. So I thought the Serbian coach did a bad job with with his X's and O's in this game. if Joe Mazzulla was coaching Serbia in this tournament, would they have won the semifinal game against the U.S.? If he was coaching that game yesterday for Serbia, and I believe their coach is like a really established like EuroLeague coach, do they win with Joe Mazzulla yesterday? Remember, Joe Mazzulla did some of the most creative stuff we've ever seen. What was it? Remember he fouled? What was it? Up six? He fouled. Remember that? Yeah. Like he's done. And LeBron even gave him credit for it. Remember, LeBron's like, that could be the next thing. Like, so what do you guys think? Joe Mazzulla win that game yesterday if he's coaching Serbia?
They would have taken a ton of threes. And that's the one thing that I like. They would have
hunted Curry. They would have been hunting Curry. They would have been putting Curry in ISO.
Would have had 30 points just raining from beyond the arc.
Who the hell was that lefty hitting everything?
There was one guy on that team. I've never I was trying to chat with somebody about this yesterday, and I'm like, dude, I watch a lot of basketball. You guys watch a lot of basketball. There was one guy for Serbia, so I can't think of his name off the top of my head. I'm like, I've never heard of this guy. Like, I don't even know who this is. And this guy is killing Team USA right now. This is unbelievable.
Well, it kind of goes back to like these fun what ifs, right? It goes back to what Ev was saying about the continuity or lack thereof on Team USA. Like, the whole Tatum, Holiday, and White, why aren't they playing together? If you rolled out last year's champion Boston Celtics and threw them into this competition in place of Team USA, would the Celtics roll to a gold medal against all of these other countries? I mean, maybe. I mean, again, like how much does continuity matter? How much does coaching matter? I got mocked by a couple of people for saying it on Twitter, who I think entirely missed the point. But I had just put out after Team USA came back to win, like, in the end, talent wins out, because obviously Team USA is dramatically more talented than Serbia, outside of maybe not having the best player overall. You've got the next 10. So I'll respect intended, I guess, to Bogdan, but I mean these are the kind of fun what ifs of the thing, and maybe that Celtics team would roll the gold. Maybe Mazzulla would have coached Serbia to a win, especially. I mean, if that knucklehead got him up by 17, Mazzulla could have finished the job, I would think.
I think they would have. I think Mazzulla would have won that.
It would have been fun for sure. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. I hope Mazzulla gets a shot on 2028, because again, talk about all the creativity that he does. And like somebody
else could hire him too, by the way. I think the France coach is pretty long in the tooth. Like this could be his last Olympics, I think. Sure. Like I think he's 72 or something. Correct me if I know Kenny Atkinson's on that staff, so maybe he's the next guy. Jody Fernandez is coaching the Canadian team, which I thought he did a good job early on in the tournament. Then they didn't like the game that they played against France. I didn't really understand their strategy, where it's like France has no guards and you have great guards and you have great defenders. I don't know why they weren't like pressuring those guys, right? Like it didn't make sense to me, but he could get it. He could get a job with a different team.
So I had I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because, again, we're sitting here recording on a Friday. Maybe people listen tonight. Maybe they listen Saturday or, Saturday prior to USA France. But, games at 3:30 in the afternoon. So in case you don't, a preview of the gold medal game isn't going to matter all that much to people, obviously. But I had made the statement to Ev, prior to United States and Serbia that, like he felt that, and I'll let him talk about this, but he felt like, watch out, like Wemby and France, they're about to win the gold. And I had said, basically, please, a little bit of American pride, maybe, but, the United States is going to roll. And obviously what happens against Serbia happens. Well, we see the U.S. advance, obviously, and they are sitting here at 16-point favorites. I'm looking at FanDuel going into this game against France. Again, Saturday 3:30 is tip-off for anyone that does intend to watch this thing. What are your expectations? What kind of chances here, Barrett, do you give Wemby and France to complete the upset? Because it would be a significant upset.
Yeah, I don't give them much of a chance. It's so weird that, not weird. I mean, I guess it's kind of predictable that they got better when they stopped playing Gobert. And it was this whole weird thing where Gobert said he had surgery on his finger, and the coach came out and he said, actually, no, I just switched the lineup. He didn't have surgery. That's basically what he said. But it would be one thing, I would maybe consider giving France a chance if it was the reason they were in this spot is because Wemby's going off, right? Like Wemby just looks like the best player in the world. He's putting up 25-point games, but he's really not scoring the ball effectively, right? Like, as I mentioned, like Yabusele was the best player for them. And look, Wemby's doing some things from a defensive perspective. I really thought that the toughest matchup for Team USA was Germany. And look, you give France credit for beating Germany, but the Schroeder's like a totally different player in FIBA. The Wagner brothers are really good. And Franz he wasn't good in the last game, and he had been having an outstanding tournament. But those guys have a lot of athletic players, so I thought Germany would have had a chance. I don't think they have enough offense to compete with the U.S., and I actually think what they're going to do defensively. And remember, Embiid wasn't Embiid's 70-point game against Wemby? I believe it was, but
no,
that
was against Gobert. Because it was good. Well, you might be right. You're right.
I think it was against Wemby, but I could be wrong on that. But I think that they're going to put somebody else on Wemby. I don't think that it's going to be Embiid. Like, I think they may, like we saw LeBron go at Jokic. I think they may try to get physical with Wemby and just have like Embiid off the ball. I don't think France has enough firepower to keep up with the U.S. And quite frankly, I don't think they're going to be able to stop the U.S. offensively. Like their tougher game was in the semifinals against Serbia. And I would say that's at least, it has to be in some capacity, a wake up call for Team USA. I wish it was Germany to be. And look, the atmosphere is probably going to be crazy, right? Because they're playing at home. The French crowd hates Embiid because Embiid was contemplating playing for them. Like, so maybe the atmosphere helps France, like the home court advantage, but I don't see. I wish it was Germany or Canada, quite frankly. I'm not excited because France was so bad in pool play. The reason they're in this is because they got that stupid 4-point play. Remember that at the end of the Japan game? They got a stupid, and they kicked Rui Hachimura out of the game. Like, that's the reason they beat Japan. That's the only reason they're in this.
Yeah, but it's only one game, so anything can happen. My point with Kaufman was we were fishing around for something to talk about because until Tatum got benched against Serbia, there was really just not a lot to talk about. And so I was like, can we do a segment on good thing the Celtics got their title now because Wemby's coming in, Wemby's here. He's going to start to own this league and it's going to be way harder to win because Wemby's nuts. And then of course the Serbia games happen. So, obviously things are a little different. I'm not, after what I just saw against Serbia, again, I believe in the USA. I think they're going to win, but Wemby can go off for a game, and the fact that he can dominate the game on both ends of the floor if he's shooting well. Like, I know he hasn't shot well, but again, he, like Curry yesterday or Curry Thursday, he finally has a really great game shooting the basketball. Has 36 points in the game, first really good shooting game from the tournament. Wemby could have, because he's just got ridiculous range and can dunk on anybody. He could easily have a big impact on the offensive end in addition to all the stuff that he does defensively where he just scares people from getting fast break layups. I mean, he's in everybody's head, as a trail guy, whenever you're going down the floor. So I do think, the USA will win this game, but I'm not putting anything. It's only one game. It's only 40 minutes, not 48. Like I don't know about you guys, but at a certain point, I'm like, does Team USA know this is only 40 minutes and not 48? There's not enough time to come back in this one. In the fourth quarter, they're down double digits. I'm like, there's no way they're going to do this. And then, they magically, it was the Durant 3, then the Booker 3 consecutively that really bailed them out. Whether that was a foul on Jokic or not, I thought it was. Did Ant pull him down? I don't think so. Or did Davis pull him down? I don't think so. I thought Jokic kind of ran him over. But that was the turning point of the game right there. Durant hits that 3, then Booker gets the 3, 6-point swing, then the rest is history.
Yeah. The one thing that French team has found is that guy, I can't tell if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but the Coordinator guy who's like super fast, like he's been good for them recently. But even if you go back to their last game that they won, they only shot 6 of 27 from 3. And look, their defense has been much better without going with the defensive player of the year in the NBA, but we'll see, man. Like it would be, and I think the one way that they can sort of stay, and this is going to sound cliche, but I think the start is so important for them because the U.S. is putting out a defensive unit that's not good. Like it's not a good defensive group. They turned it on and they played better late against Serbia, but I talked about it earlier. The defensive personnel is not great in their starting lineup. Serbia got out to the lead against that group. Like Curry was the story of the first, like 14 of the first 15 points, but it's like, oh wait, they're down because Serbia was generating all these good shots. So I think it's going to come down to, hey, can France get up on that starting unit? Because if they can, I mean, then they're going to have the crowd behind them. I kind of hope it works out that way. I mean, not obviously I want the US to win, but I would like it to be like just from a pure basketball perspective, that game was awesome. Like the Serbia US game was so much fun, I thought. I mean, Jokic was unreal with some of the passes he was making.
Yeah, I'm with you. Again, not to sound un-American or whatever. I want Team USA to win, but give us a game. Give us something fun. It's a gold medal game. And, I don't think any of the three of us, and probably most people listening, are going to lose any sleep if France does actually win this thing. Not that I see it happening, but give us something competitive. I think that would be fun. But yeah, and I do wonder, if I'm betting the thing, because I probably am, I do wonder if what happened with Team USA against Serbia is not to be cliche, but a wake-up call to where U.S. does come in and blow doors, or if that is an indication that this team is not exactly maybe what we thought it was earlier in the tournament, and France is going to find a way to keep this thing close and make it competitive, and therefore you bet the plus 16. I don't know, just something to think about, obviously, and to each their own in terms of how you want to handicap this thing. But Tatum, at least around here, is the biggest story, and Brown before that, and what's still to come here as we sit in almost mid-August, which is kind of crazy. So September right around the corner, and camp and preseason and regular season's all rapidly approaching. I mean, there is basketball on the way for the Boston Celtics, not just a trio of Boston Celtics that are busy there in France. But Barrett, thanks so much for hopping on, man. We appreciate it. Make sure, obviously, you check out the Off the Pike Ringer podcast, the Barrett hosts. You can get Brian on Twitter. It's Brian Barrett. He just put out a show with Tom Caron of Nesson talking about the Red Sox, who are fun again. And we'll see what they can do against the Astros. Just, again, bet the over. Expect runs in that one and pretty much every game, because that has been the trend for these Sox throughout the year. They can hit, they can't pitch, and those things oftentimes go together and lead to a lot of scoring. But it's a wild card chase, a lot of fun, and maybe, just maybe, as we get closer and closer to that, we'll sprinkle in a thought of that as well. But that is primarily a basketball podcast, so we don't bother. But Barrett, like I said, thanks for hopping on. Ev, always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, fellas.
It's Celtics Beat. We'll see you again next time.